Yes, I guess. I'm getting ready. I think I could give it now. Really. Ready to go? All right. Julie, you ready? Good morning. The purpose of today's meeting is to update you about the status of the opioid litigation that the elected officials from the county and city instructed us to file. And as you probably know, we did that by filing in the federal court in Baltimore, and that case has now been transferred out to be part of what's known as a mass tort action, multi-district litigation in Ohio in federal court. It's now one of 2,000 cases that focus on manufacturers and distributors of opioids and the impact that they've had for counties and cities. Um, to put it very briefly, the impact has been devastating. I think everybody knows. Over 400,000 people have now died. Americans have now died as a result of opioids, according to the CDC. And every day we're still losing 130 people. So it's like a plane crash a day due to opioids. The case itself is based against the manufacturers and the distributors, primarily for the taxpayers, because frankly, if the manufacturers and distributors don't pay, the taxpayers will. And it's really twofold. First, the manufacturers came out with a drug that they said was safe when it wasn't, and they knew it, but they continued to say it because they were making money. And the distributors have an obligation under federal law through what's called the ARCOS database to monitor the sales. The sheriff knows this well. If you have something that's a controlled dangerous substance, Dave, you know this well, it is a dangerous substance, so it needs to be controlled. You can't just put it out on the street. The ARCOS database requires, under federal law, that the manufacturers and distributors register, specifically the distributors register what they're selling. So now, today, after a tremendous amount of discovery in this case for the last 2 years, and having gone through well over 1 million documents, we've made a lot of progress. And we can now tell you today who made the pills that came into Washington County, who brought them here, and who put them out on the street. The numbers are grim. You all know there are 147,000 residents in Washington County. And incredibly, during the period of 2006 to 2012, 55 million doses of opioids came into this county. It's stunning. 42 million of that were hydrocodone and oxycodone pills. Those are the pills that are most commonly abused. Certainly the health department would know that. So when people ask, why do we have the problem, I think we now know. And most particularly, nationwide, 76 billion opioid dosages were put out. And it's not just the volume, but it's also the potency, because the higher the potency, the more likely it is that people are going to get addicted or they're going to die. And unfortunately, you'll see from the information that we have now, a lot of times the dosages that were distributed were through the roof. So, in Washington County, the top manufacturers are Spec GX. And that may not mean much to you, but it's the generic manufacturer that's owned by Mallinckrodt, which of course is a major manufacturer of pharmaceuticals all over the world. Par Pharma is number 2. They are the generic form for Endo. And Actavis is the generic for Teva, which is also a major manufacturer based in Israel. The top distributors are Cardinal Health, McKesson, and CVS. And we now know that for oxycodone, it was Cardinal Health and McKesson. For hydrocodone, it was CVS and McKesson. The top 10 pharmacies. We now know the pharmacies that put the most pills out on the street here in Washington County and the city of Hagerstown. CVS overwhelmingly was the largest pharmacy in terms of pills put out, and what we call MMEs. MMEs are the medical morphine equivalent. That means how strong the dosage is. So between 2006 and 2012, almost 16 million dosage units were put out by CVS. The worst pharmacy for CVS was Wilson Boulevard down in the south end of Hagerstown. Also notable was the CVS there on Cannon Avenue. And if you go back and think about it, I think it makes a lot of sense because you can probably recall that time frame and recollect what those areas looked like and think about what those areas look like now. Home Care Pharmacy was the number 2 pharmacy with 6 DEA licenses. They had a combined total of 8.5 million doses out on the street, and Walmart came in number 3. So those are the pharmacies that really have put the most pills out. It's a problem that social scientists will tell us we're going to deal with for another 20 years. It makes sense. Unfortunately, the scientific data is now that it only takes 7 days to get somebody hooked on opioids because, as you know, the opioid affects the brain, rewires the brain, and it takes roughly 3 years of concerted treatment to get that person off again because the drug is so powerful that it changes the production of dopamine. The dopamine is what makes people feel stable and happy. When that's taken away from the opioid is what people seek instead to try to bring about that calm and that feeling of well-being. And of course, it is a horrible, horrible cycle that usually crashes into misery or death. The status of the case right now is that the first wave of cases will be tried in October. They are for 2 counties outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and that's Summit County and Cuyahoga County. So that case will start October the 21st in what's known as a bellwether. And we will see what jurors think of the entire situation and whether or not they hold the manufacturers and distributors liable, and if so, what they do in terms of the amount of damages, because the impact to the taxpayer is severe and will be severe. After that, about the same time, we should see a trial kick off in Nevada, which will be led by members of our national trial team, and I think that's going to be extremely important because it's focused on the role of the distributors. Again, the distributors throughout this have sort of played dumb and said we didn't have anything to do with this, and this was all just a matter of following orders, so to speak. But if you look at the ARCOS database, it is extremely apparent that these distributors were making profits through the roof on the backs of our citizens, and unfortunately on the deaths of our citizens. So that's the first bellwether trial, and as I say, the Nevada case will be very important as well. And then the second bellwether trial will be down in Huntington, West Virginia, Cabell County, and I think that's going to be extremely strong as well. That's also led by people from our national trial team, and we hope to have the honor to maybe assist in some small way, meaning our firm, Pool Law Group, assisting with that. With that, I wanted to just close it out by recognizing the county and the city. I'll tell you, it took strong leadership to get into this. It's taken a lot of strength to identify the problem. Emily, I'm looking at you. I remember you were one of the first people to talk about this. Commissioners, Sheriff, it's great to have everybody here. Congressman Trone has a representative. I know the Congressman has been very outspoken about this. It is great to see unity because we're going to have to stick together with this for some time to come. Very good. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I snuck in.
Yes.
Senator Van Hollen.
Oh, excellent. Yes, I saw you were in town when Senator Van Hollen was here the other day. It is great to have you here. We very much appreciate it, and I know Senator Van Hollen is very committed to the fight as well. So thank you, and please give him our regards. With that, I want to step back and allow any questions, but also allow the county and city and congressional representatives to make any comments that they would like to make. Before we break, I see my wife sitting over there. Kathy has been working all the time to pull this data together. I know she is going to say, why didn't you recognize all the staffers? We have had fantastic support from city and county government. in amassing all the data. The data that we now have to put our case together, what we would call a plaintiff fact sheet, which is basically our prima facie case, our basic statement. Those reports now run up to 1,000 pages, and the information that we've gotten from you all is essential, and it's been fantastic. So we thank you for the cooperation, because this, Rod and I were talking before this started, this is not just an impact on crime, it's not just an impact on families, it is at every level of our existence here in the county. It's the school system, it's Department of Social Services, it's our health system, it's our police, it's our first responders, it's our economic base. As we said earlier, if you can't pass a drug test, you're not going to be attractive for an employer. So we appreciate very much all the cooperation. And with that, thank you all very much, and I'd like to hand it over to our other electeds and who would like to speak.
Okay, well, thank you, Bruce. I think this is ironically an exciting day in that the problem has been identified in the distribution. The number of pills and dosages at 55 million for 147,000 people is obviously a problem. So problem identification and trying to cut the head of the snake off. To me, this is an exciting day because the work Emily and the commissioners, the sheriff has done, Dave with his work as well on the front end of the 911 center. We see it every day. It's in education, it's in economic development, it's everywhere through our community. So I'm excited to identify the problem here and try to attack it head on. So thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Congressman Trone's office, would you like to speak?
Yes. Good morning. It's an honor to be here on behalf of Congressman David Trone. The Congressman does extend his thanks and appreciations to Bruce Poole for all of his hard work on this issue. I do have the following statement from the Congressman. Washington County has been hit incredibly hard by the opioid epidemic, and I am glad both Hagerstown and the county are pursuing action in court. Drug manufacturers and distributors must be held accountable for their misdeeds in starting this crisis, in which bad actors sought to drive up opioid prescriptions to devastating levels within our communities. According to the DEA's own database from 2006 to 2012, Washington County saw 40.6 opioid pills distributed per person per year. This number is staggering. The county should never have been flooded with that number of pills. This is our most pressing public health crisis. We can't sit idly by while 192 people are dying of drug overdoses every day. We must attack this from multiple angles, both through the courts, through legislation in Congress, and the state legislature. We need responsible prescribing practices and investment in prevention treatment programs. We must work with law enforcement on interdiction to make sure nothing like this happens again. We all have a role to play to end this horrible epidemic. I pledge to continue working hard every single day to combat the opioid crisis and to support Washington County in its efforts to hold manufacturers and distributors accountable.
Jeff Klein, President of the Washington County Commissioners. Today, more than ever, the opioid crisis is affecting families and communities across America, across this state, and yes, you hear the deplorable, the awful statistics for Washington County. The opioid crisis has shown no discrimination in race, age, income levels. It's disrupting communities, tearing apart families, and ruining individual lives for the future, for years to come. It is my belief that the parties responsible for delivering these drugs to our community be held financially responsible not just for the hardships on the family, but the devastating effect on our emergency services, causing our taxpayers to endure a lot of costs for serving this opioid crisis. I close by saying this is an immediate need to fix now, and we will not let it go untold. Thank you. Emily Keller, would you step next? Right.
Jeff's throwing stuff at me. Hey, good morning. I'm Emily Keller with the Hagerstown City Council. I don't really have a whole lot to add that hasn't been said here today. We're well aware this is the deadliest health crisis in U.S. history, and we need to act, and we need to act now. You know, we hear 130 people a day are dying, and statistics are easy to spit out, but we have to keep in mind that every single one of those 130 people is more than a statistic. It's a friend, it's a family member, it's a community member, and it's just devastating to think of how we got here. But I must say, Washington County, I mean, looking at the people standing up here and the fight that we're doing, we have really, I think, painted the picture to our community and to the country of how this has affected every single one of us. And I'm extremely proud of that. I'm extremely proud of the work that is being done. And I look forward to helping solve this crisis. Bruce, thank you very much for leading this charge. And it's a blessing to see we're all in this together. So just thank you guys very much.
Bruce, it's obvious to public safety because we deal with this on the front line every day, but it's nice to know that the numbers validate the impact that it's had on public safety in Washington County. We still deal with this on a daily basis, and we'll continue to be dealing with this for some time. The fiscal impact to public safety has been tremendous, as well as to the impacts to our families and our loved ones in the county. And, we certainly applaud you for your efforts, and we hope that this continues to move forward and that we see some fiscal responsibility on the part of these pharmacies and distributors for what they've done to our community. Thank you.
My name is Deanna Gaviri. I'm the Deputy Health Officer with Washington County Health Department. And I think I would just echo many of the sentiments here. This has been, the opioid crisis represents a catastrophe in public health across the nation and here in Washington County. And in response, the Washington County Health Department has diverted resources, dedicated resources across all of our divisions. In our behavioral health division, in our clinical divisions, we are seeing the impact of the opioid crisis, and we applaud this effort to extract some accountability for the crisis. We know where this came from. It's not a mystery.
Not much more to add, but as the numbers were presented to all of us today, they're pretty astronomical, pretty sad, pretty grim. And for me, I would just like to reach out and say a special thank you to the Poole Law Firm for the awesome job that they've done putting all of the information together, fighting for Washington County. Mr. Poole, he's a lifelong Washington County resident, so I'm sure, I know this is near and dear to his heart and the fight that he's putting on for our community. I think a real special thanks goes to Emily Keller. She has fought this epidemic from day one all over the county. She's put on events, Go Purple and so forth, and we need leadership like that just to keep things moving forward, to keep all of the commissioners and all the elected officials and all of the county staff apprised to everything that's going on in our community. So I'd just like to reach out and say thank you to everybody that's really had an impact on this special day today. Thank you.
Commissioner Wagner, I make this pretty short. A few years ago, when I had the aspirations of being a county commissioner and achieved that, I said that drug addictions would be the collapse of a community. Well, I think it's anybody here, it would be hard to think of anybody connected to the family members, or friends that hasn't been affected one way or the other. I know I can, everybody, and I have 7 grandchildren, so I worry about this. So I think everybody has been affected in one way or another. And just ask the next 10 people you see. I'll guarantee they're going to say, yeah. It's eye-opening, but our eyes are already open. But it's eye-opening that when Attorney Poole read the $55 million since 2006, I was like, no, you had to get those zeros wrong. But that's a ton. But anyway, I'll close with saying I really appreciate everything Emily's done. She started spearheading this, the staff, all the county, the staff of Attorney Poole's office. Not an easy fix. I think, Bruce, you said it could be 20 years just now, but it's a start. So, and again, Emily sort of kicked this off. I didn't know, I don't think anybody realized how bad it really was. Thank you.
I'm Nan Mann, representing Senator Van Hollen this morning, and this is a perfect storm. Unfortunately, it's gotten out of control, and Senator Van Hollen has been directly responsible for securing the opioid crisis response, yes, which is securing $3.8 billion to help remedying the problem, going to healthcare centers, going to research about the disease. So I know the government is actively pursuing try to get a treatment. But I think a lot of this also has to come with Emily bringing this to fruition and educating the population, including our children, to know that the education starts, and we just need to fight the storm, weather the storm, and fight the battle, and we will win the war. Thank you.
So not much I can add that hasn't already been said here today, other than to thank county leadership, our county administrator, certainly Emily and the mayor and council, and our other public service partners, and most importantly, pool law offices for taking this fight on. This is something that emergency services saw coming. I don't think we realized, because we hadn't experienced something of this magnitude yet, but we saw this coming. We saw more and more calls for overdoses. We saw more and more fatalities. The numbers kept going up, and then we started looking at the drug that we were using more and more often to change the effect of what these opioids were doing. So as an example, and to touch two things that we haven't touched on today real quick, is we've seen over a 200% increase in the administration of our Narcan in the last 7 to 8 years, 200%. 4,000 in 2011, we're administering over 12,000, this is dollars. 4,000 was our cost in 2011. Our cost for Narcan today, administration, is over $12,000. So that's a 200% increase. The second side is the emotional toll that it takes on the families that are experiencing this. But as the sheriff would say, there's a secondary emotional toll on the responders that have to see this 200 more times than what they used to have to see this thing. We see a lot of bad stuff each day. This just compounds, and an epidemic of this size just creates an additional workload, both physically and mentally, on our staff. So we're looking forward to a positive outcome, and I believe we've got the right resources committed in the right places, and it may take some time, but we'll get through this. We will win this fight. And for that, that's really what we've got. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, you're so sly. All right, thanks to everybody for coming. And I will say, you know, this case, as it unfolds, it represents the worst in America. It's all about greed. It's the people in the corporate offices saying, wow, look how much we're selling in Hagerstown, how much we're selling in Washington County, let's crank it up. But it also shows the best in America, shows people coming together on a local basis, reaching out, building bridges, and fighting a fight and turning the tide. And it's going to take a while for us to get out